A woman moves into a house at the end of a dead-end road. The neighbors warn her. She laughs it off. On her third night, she finds a locked room she was never told about, and inside it, a chair facing the wall. The chair is still warm. An abandoned psychiatric hospital, sealed since 1994. 4 people go in on a dare. 4 come out. But the footage they shot shows a 5th person walking the halls behind them the entire time, and none of them ever looked back. A man inherits a pocket watch from his grandfather's estate. It keeps perfect time, except it runs backwards. He thinks it's a novelty. He stops thinking that on the night the watch stops completely, and his neighbor knocks on his door to tell him his grandfather's grave has been opened from the inside. I'm Adrian Vale, and if you're new here, this is not that kind of channel. I don't do jump scares. I don't do sound effects. I don't need to. What I do is find the accounts that already have everything a horror story needs: a real place, a real person, and a detail so specific it makes your brain refuse to let go of it at 3 a.m. Before we get into tonight's stories, if something has happened to you, something strange, something without an explanation, something you've never said out loud because you were afraid of how it would sound, send it to me. My email is in the description. I read every single one. Some of what you're about to hear started exactly that way. Someone deciding, finally, to put it into words. Tonight, we have 3 of them. The listing called it a rural retreat with original 1887 character. That's realtor language for the walls have stories, and not all of them are finished. When Dana Mercer signed the lease on the old Callaway property at the end of Route 9, she was 34, recently divorced, and exactly the kind of person who believed a house in the middle of nowhere could be the cure for something. It wasn't. The house sat at the bottom of a long gravel road, surrounded by birch trees that had grown so close together they blocked the light by early afternoon. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles up the hill, an old man named Harwick, who brought her a jar of apple butter on her first day and didn't come inside, stood on the porch, handed it over, and said quietly, like he was stating a weather report, "Don't let it get to know you." Then he walked back to his truck. Dana figured he was just the local flavor of eccentric. She'd find out later that Harwick had lived in Hollow Creek his entire 68 years and had never once stepped through that front door. The first week was normal, cold, quiet, the kind of rural stillness city people romanticize until they're actually inside it. Dana worked remotely, kept her phone charged, and started sleeping better than she had in years. She called her sister on a Thursday evening. "I think this place might actually fix me." The second week, she found the door. It was at the end of the upstairs hallway, recessed slightly into the wall, painted over so many times the frame had nearly dissolved into the plaster. She'd walked past it for 8 days without registering it as a door at all. But that afternoon, the light came through the window at exactly the right angle, and the seam appeared like a scar. She pressed against it. It gave slightly. There was a keyhole with no key. She had never been given a key to anything in that house except the front lock. She called the management company, a property firm out of Burlington. The woman on the phone paused for just a moment too long before speaking. Then she said it was probably an old storage closet, that previous tenants had complained about a smell from it years back, and that it had been sealed as a precaution. She'd have someone come out to open it. No one ever came. On the 14th night, Dana woke at 2:47 a.m. The house was making a sound she hadn't heard before. Not settling wood, not the pipes. It was lower than that, a slow, rhythmic pressure somewhere in the walls, like the house was breathing. She lay still for 11 minutes. Then she got up. The upstairs hallway was black. She turned on her phone flashlight and walked toward the sealed door. The paint along the frame had cracked cleanly, a thin, even line all the way around, as if the seal had been broken from the inside. The door was open. Dana stood in the threshold, and what she saw was this: a small room, 8 feet across, bare plaster walls, no window, no smell, nothing in it except one thing: a wooden chair, ladder back, sitting perfectly centered in the room, facing the far wall. She told herself she would not touch it. She crossed the room anyway. She put her hand on the seat. The wood was warm, not the ambient cool of an unheated room in a Vermont September, warm the way a chair is warm when a person has just stood up from it. Dana left that night with a single bag, the engine light on, and 4 hours of highway between her and her sister's apartment in Boston. When she called the management company the next morning to terminate the lease, the woman on the phone didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't mention the 30-day notice clause in the contract. She just said, very quietly, "That's completely understandable." 3 months later, Dana drove back. Daytime, a friend in the passenger seat. She parked at the mouth of the gravel road and didn't get out. She just looked at the house. The upstairs hallway window, the one at the end of the hall, directly opposite where the sealed door used to be, had a chair sitting in it, facing outward, facing her. She recognized the shape of it. The Callaway property has had 11 tenants since 2005. The average length of stay is 6 weeks. The property management company's website has listed it as currently available for the past 4 years without interruption. The most recent listing was updated 3 weeks ago. The photos do not show the upstairs hallway. Hargrove Psychiatric Institute closed in November of 1994 after a state inspection found conditions the official report described only as inhumane. The full report was never released to the public. The building, 5 floors of poured concrete, built on the eastern edge of Galloway in 1961, has been padlocked and chain-linked ever since. Someone cuts the lock every few years. Someone replaces it. The cycle repeats. It has never fully stopped anyone. Marcus Tully was 26 when he and 3 friends went in the Friday before Halloween. He'd grown up 30 miles from Galloway hearing about Hargrove the way kids hear about every local horror landmark, exaggerated, second-hand, half-legend. There were Reddit threads, old YouTube videos, a Facebook group with thousands of members comparing photos and accounts. Marcus had seen all of it. He thought he understood what he was walking into. He did not. There were 4 of them: Marcus, his girlfriend Renee, his college roommate Dex, who wore a chest-mounted GoPro, and a woman named Claire who said she'd done urban exploration before and knew how to move through abandoned buildings safely. They entered through a ground-floor window on the east side at around 9 p.m. The plan was simple: walk the building floor by floor, reach the roof, and be back at the cars by midnight. Floors 1 through 4 were what anyone who's been inside a building like that would expect: caved ceilings, rooms full of overturned furniture, water damage so deep in the walls you could smell it before you could see it. They moved carefully. They stuck together. Nothing happened. Marcus would later say the most unsettling thing about those 4 floors was how ordinary they felt, like any other ruin. Ward 13 was on the 5th floor. A handmade sign above the doorway, black paint on bare concrete, faded but legible, the quiet ward. It was the only door in the entire building that was still on its hinges, and it was the only one that was closed. Marcus pushed it open, and they went in. The ward was wrong in a way that took a moment to fully register. Every other room in Hargrove looked the way abandoned rooms look: decayed, chaotic, time collapsed on itself. Ward 13 looked like it was being used. 8 beds, four to a side, with gray institutional sheets pulled tight and folded at the corners. The surfaces were clean. The floor was clean. In a building sealed for nearly 30 years, in a room that showed no signs of entry, the beds were made and the sheets were white. Dex said quietly, "Someone has been in here." Renee turned around without saying anything and walked back toward the door. The others followed. Down 5 flights, out the window, across the lot, onto the highway. No one talked much. They were back on the road by 10:45, more than an hour ahead of schedule. 2 days later, Marcus sat down to review the GoPro footage. The recording was clean and steady throughout. 47 minutes of Dex walking through Hargrove, the headlamp cutting white circles through the dark, 4 voices occasionally murmuring off camera. Marcus watched it at normal speed first. Then he scrubbed back to the beginning and went through it frame by frame. And there, from the very first moment they entered the building, running continuously through every hallway, every stairwell, every floor, all the way to Ward 13, there was a 5th person. Always at the far edge of the light, standing still when they moved, moving to the next position when they stopped. In some frames it was facing them, in some it appeared to be looking at the wall. At no point during the entire 47 minutes did any of them turn around to see it. In the footage from Ward 13 itself, when Dex's headlamp swept across the beds as he entered, it caught something in that fraction of a second. A depression in the nearest mattress, the slow, flat shape of a person lying under the sheet. Still, patient. Marcus sent the footage to 3 people before he wiped it from his hard drive. 2 confirmed what he saw. The 3rd replied within an hour. "I went to Hargrove in 2018. I have the same thing on my footage. I never posted it because I thought something was wrong with my camera. I thought I was alone in there." West Virginia has approved the demolition of Hargrove Psychiatric Institute 3 times since 2005. Each order has been delayed by administrative reasons that have never been clearly explained in public filings. The building remains standing. The padlock on the front gate was replaced 8 months ago. As of this recording, it has already been cut again. When Thomas Greaves died at 81 in a Denton nursing home, he left behind a house full of things no one wanted, and one thing his grandson could not explain. The estate was handled quickly. The family had never been close, and grief was not the dominant emotion at the reading of the will. Ethan Greaves, 29, received a box of his grandfather's personal effects and was told to go through it and decide what to donate. He almost didn't open it. Inside, along with a worn leather wallet, a military photograph, and some loose change, there was a pocket watch, brass case, cream face, Roman numerals. No brand marking. It was wound and running. Ethan held it for a moment, thought it might be worth something to a collector, and set it on his kitchen counter. It was only later that evening, passing through the kitchen to pour himself a drink, that he noticed the second hand was moving counterclockwise. Not fast, not theatrical, just steadily, calmly, running the wrong direction. He assumed it was a novelty piece. He showed it to his girlfriend, Mara, who laughed and called it very grandfather energy. He put it on his bookshelf and forgot about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, he noticed the watch had moved. Not on its own. He assumed he'd bumped it, or Mara had. But it was now sitting on the edge of the shelf, face up, and when he picked it up, he realized it was running faster. Still backward, but faster than before. He set it back down and told himself to throw it out. He did not throw it out. Over the next 2 weeks, the watch continued to behave in ways Ethan could not rationalize. The speed varied, sometimes slow, sometimes nearly frantic. Twice he found it on a different surface than where he'd left it, in rooms he hadn't entered. Once he found it face down on his bedroom floor with no explanation for how it had gotten there. He took it to a clock repair shop on the edge of town. The watchmaker opened the case and went quiet. Then he said without looking up, "This mechanism has been modified. The entire movement is inverted. Someone built it this way on purpose. This isn't a malfunction. Someone made it to run backward." He handed it back and asked Ethan to leave. Ethan called his mother that night to ask what she knew about the watch. She didn't know anything about a watch, but she mentioned, almost in passing, that Thomas Greaves had been estranged from the family because in his final years he'd become increasingly preoccupied with what she described only as old ideas about time. He had tried to explain something to her once. She changed the subject. She didn't elaborate. On the last night Ethan kept the watch in his apartment, it stopped completely. He picked it up and it was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Cold the way metal gets when it's been left outside in winter, not sitting on a shelf in a heated apartment. He set it down and went to bed. At 4:12 a.m., his neighbor knocked on his door. Her name was Carol. She was in her 60s and had lived in the building for 20 years and had never knocked on his door in the night. She stood in the hallway in her robe with an expression he described as not upset, just careful. She told him she'd gotten a call from the county. The cemetery in Denton, where Thomas Greaves had been buried 11 days earlier, had been vandalized overnight. One grave had been disturbed. The casket had been pushed up from below. The lid was open. The grave was empty. Ethan did not touch the watch again. He wrapped it in a dish towel, drove to the cemetery the following morning, and left it on the grave. He has not been back to Denton since. No cause for the disturbance was ever determined. The pocket watch has not been recovered. The last person Ethan told this story to asked him a question he has never been able to answer. If the watch ran backward, what exactly was it counting down to? 3 stories, 3 real places, 3 people who didn't go looking for what found them. If something about any of this feels familiar, if something you've been trying not to think about just came back, you know where to find me. Stay careful.